Let's start, speaking of which, with the beautiful state of Kentucky. Kentucky hosting Florida. Kentucky opened as a 2.5-point favorite. It's down to about a point now, over under set at 44. But it is wild how quickly this rivalry has turned in the Wildcats' favor. The fact that they are favored after years and years and years of misery. What was it, about 30 years that Kentucky went without winning? Then they win in the Swamp. I believe it was 2018, I believe. Of course, 3 seasons ago, they win in Lexington. Last year, they win in the Swamp. Now they are going for a 3-game winning streak on Saturday at home. When I look at this game, I think a couple things stand out. First of all, for those of you who haven't watched Kentucky much this year, these ain't your grandpa's Kentucky Wildcats, okay? This is a team that, while they still play very good defense, they are a much more explosive offense. This is a team that is averaging 38 points per game through 4 games, took care of business in the out-of-conference 3-0, and then put up 45 at Vanderbilt last week, second 40-point performance of the year. Devin Leary is in at quarterback. Ray Davis, a former Vanderbilt running back, has transferred in as well. And Kentucky, believe it or not, has one of the better wide receiver cores with Barian Brown, Dane Key, and others. Florida, on the other hand, and this is the interesting part, Florida, they kind of play more like Kentucky than Kentucky does, right? For years with this Kentucky Wildcats team, Mark Stoops, it was ground and pound, control the clock, run the football. Now it's kind of Florida who does that as well. Kentucky's the one airing it out. Florida's the one, if you watch that Tennessee game a few weeks ago, this is a team that wants to control the clock, wants to be in control. Again, that Tennessee game, they fall down 7-0, but they build back. They have a 26-7 lead at halftime, if I remember correctly. And then the second half, they just basically sat on the ball, chewed up the clock, kept that Tennessee offense off the field. They only had to score 3 points, and they ended up still beating Tennessee 29-10, or 29-16, I think was the final score. Regardless, 2 completely different teams, different than you expect. Kentucky's the high-powered offense. Florida's the ground and pound. So the question now becomes, can Florida improve to 2-0 in the SEC, or will it be Kentucky? Again, all the money appears to be coming in on Florida. Florida was a 2.5-point favorite. Now they're down to 1. I'll be blunt. In this game, I actually like the Kentucky Wildcats, and let me explain why. There's really 3 reasons why. One, first of all, I think there's a little bit too much like pro-Florida buzz right now, right? College football is the craziest sport because we know the narrative on Florida. They lose at Utah, a good team that is now 4-0 as we speak. And it is Sunbelt Billy, broke down Billy. Billy Napier's the worst thing that ever happened. It's never going to work. Then they have a quiet game against McNeese State. Then they beat Tennessee in a game that, they just kind of, like I said, sat on the ball, chewed up the clock, and found a way to win. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, Florida, they're really dangerous. They're on the way up. The recruiting's good. Give Billy Napier time. It's like we went from A to Z very quickly with Florida. And I think they're good. But listen, this is a developing program, and it's a program that very much still has a lot of work to do. I don't think this is the way Billy Napier wants to play, but because of the pieces left by Dan Mullen, because of the fact that these recruiting classes are slowly starting to trickle in, Florida currently has the number 3 class in 2024. This is a process, and this is not a very talented Florida team, and I think everybody's overhyping them based on 1 win over Tennessee. Remember, they have not lost to Tennessee since 2003. So it just feels weird how much buzz is coming in on Florida. Conversely, I know that Kentucky, they haven't been perfect early on. Devin Leary's not completing a high enough completion percentage. But what really stands out to me, as I said a minute ago, Florida plays more like Kentucky than they play like Kentucky did 6-7 years ago. What's wild to me, I think for the first time that I can ever remember in this series, Kentucky's just got better dudes across the board. And I know that some Kentucky fans would say, well, what about last year? Florida stunk last year, 6-7. We didn't have a great year, but we were better than them. What I would say is Anthony Richardson in week 2 last year at least felt like an equalizer coming in. He was coming off that big Utah game. We didn't know at the time how much he was going to struggle passing. But I only bring it up because this year, just think about it. Which quarterback would you rather have? Graham Mertz on the road or Devin Leary at home? I'd rather have Devin Leary. But then you look at the skill position guys. Ray Davis, as I said, 1,000-yard rusher a year ago at Vanderbilt. But Berrien Brown was a top 100 prospect out of Nashville. Dane Key, a really good 4-star wide receiver out of Kentucky. And those are the kinds of guys. Like, those are 2 NFL wide receivers. And if you remember, we talked about this in the offseason. In the NFL draft last year, Will Levis didn't have any NFL wide receivers. Yeah, he did. They were just really young. And that's what stands out to me. These guys look like the dudes that Florida used to have, only now they're playing at Kentucky. Those 2 wide receivers I mentioned, they combined for 8 catches, 150 yards. We saw the little head pat from Dane Key after a touchdown catch. So I just bring it up because I think Kentucky just has the better players. And this is what happens, by the way, when you have stability, when you have a program with a coach with a plan, when you have 7, 8, 9 years of the same voice, as opposed to Florida, which has been through 4 coaches in the last 8, 9 years, whatever it's been, Muschamp to McElwain to Mullen to Napier. Like, this is what happens. I think Kentucky has better players. And finally, you don't need to worry about that home field advantage. Did you see what Mark Stoops said prior to this game? He was asked about the crowd noise for a noon Eastern kickoff in Kentucky. He said, I have faith in my fan base that they will drink lots of beers and be very loud. I think he didn't say the loud part, but I think the insinuation was if they drink enough beer, they're going to be plenty loud when they come to the game. And so I look at this game, and I'll be blunt. I do like Kentucky to win at home. I'll say a final score like, 30, we'll say 31-20. I could see it being a little bit lower scoring, a little bit higher scoring. I'm going to stay away from the over-under 44, but I do like Kentucky to win outright. I do like them to cover the 1 point. Take Kentucky for a 3rd straight win in this series.